this session using accreditation to help embed continuous improvement. So my name's Simon Elias. I'm Director of the Lean Competence System. I'll be taking you through this session today. This is essentially about outlining why and how accreditation can play an important supportive role in establishing and sustaining a continuous improvement culture. So that's the main focus of what the session is about, mainly on the rationale and benefits of accreditation. There is another webinar which is about how to become accredited, which is the sort of technical side of accreditation that we also run. This sort of the sister one of this. We'll keep it under 45 minutes. You can make comments or questions via the chat facility in Zoom, and also if it's at the end we've got time for questions, you can ask anything else then. We'll circulate the slides after the event, and we are recording it, which is just a normal thing, and we'll put it on the website for those who couldn't make it today. Broadly agenda, we'll just briefly introduce the Lean Competency System, talk about the ideas around enabling and sustaining CI, and reference some of the research that we did previously on this, and then describe what we call the enabler jigsaw, which is our mechanism to try and provide some schematic device to understand how we should look at sustainability. I'll briefly touch on the accreditation process as well, and then we'll summarize at the end, and if, as I said, there's time at the end, we can have some questions as well. Briefly, a bit about the LCS, developed at the Lean Enterprise Research Centre at Cardiff University back in the early 2000s, when there was, at that time, there was a lot of lean training growth as the whole ideas became popularized, and people started, the organizations started using them. There was no structure or framework really, so we set about creating something at the time, and by 2005 we created a framework originally called the Lean Learning Ladder, and eventually rechristened the Lean Competence System as a mechanism to help organizations develop training, and individuals have some framework for developing their lean competency. And it grew pretty steadily. It was on the shelf, if you like, from 2005 onwards. By 2012, it was clear it had quite considerable potential, and we thought the best way to realize this was to set up a university licensed company, which was actually launched in 2014, Lean Competency Services Limited, which I've been running since. Almost 10 years now we've been operating as a sort of a licensed spin out, primarily involved with accreditation, accrediting organizations, which is what this is about today. Obviously individuals become certified by accrediting organizations, and then in the latter years developing a community to cater for the ongoing learning and the professional development aspect as well. So that's really what the LCS, how it came about, and that's essentially its key activities now. I think in terms of why people want accreditation, I think it's still quite strong from its origins. This endorsement was an important factor, having an external organization with some credibility say that what you're doing is robust and sound, was an important part of why accreditation was attracted. The rewarding staff to be recognized for what they've achieved and their knowledge and capability, that's become more important, I think, compared to the early days, and that is one of the key factors now why accreditation has a role. The reassurance one linked to the endorsement, I think that there's often an internal message to get across that what's being delivered is robust and is well administered and managed and so forth. There's certainly the need for a university developed framework was clear from the start, that where it comes from is important. The vehicle to mobilize change champions engagement, that's one that certainly emerged over the past few years. Once you understand, you need a lot of people to think lean can think continuous improvement, and you need a vehicle to get them to do this, then the LCS has proved to be important in that area. And the other, which I think was true from the start, the standard that can be that is adopted widely. So there's a big community of people now that are using this, which I think is important to give the whole qualification structure that sort of external validity. So that's really what it's all about, and I think many of those were there in the start. Some have emerged over the past few years, especially the behavioural ones. And we've now got around 500 organisational users around the world, drawn from all sectors and all types. There's really hardly a sector that's not included, obviously reflecting the growth of lean stroke continuous improvement type ideas. And there's always another dot appearing, which I'd like to see. Very obscure places, and now you wouldn't have thought of now using lean. So that really illustrates how the whole philosophy around lean has expanded over the past 30 years, and is really part of the of sort of normal business as usual in many areas. So that's a bit about the LCS and where it came from, why it was originally created, and the sort of growth. Talking about sustaining and embedding continued improvement, always been a key issue, was in the early years in the research centre, and I think it was around the early 2000s when it was clear that there was it wasn't all plain sailing, and some lean initiatives were failing, that our sustainability research started taking off. I thought we'd get some engagement. We got a few people on the call now. So I'm going to launch a quick poll just to ask you what you think the biggest factor in lean failure was then, in fact, even now, if you like. So I'm going to launch a poll now, which basically says, what do you think is the main factor in lean failure? And it gives you 4 options to choose from. So have a go at choosing one of those options, clicking on either poor leadership, poor communication, poor consultation, and poor methodology. So if you like to, if you assuming people can see that still, click on it. Anyone clicking? No?
I've submitted it, Simon.
Okay, fine. It's interesting. Maybe there's some delay here. I'm not sure what's happening.
I've got 8 of 9, Simon.
All right. Well, it could be. I'm actually in a hotel room in Austria, so that's probably my poor internet connection. I mean, it isn't getting through. So I shall. Well, okay. Well, I can't. I shall end the poll, and there are no results come up on my screen. So a complete failure in terms of the Zoom polling. But anyway, I'm sure most of you put things like poor leadership down. And
it's on our screen now.
Oh, is it? Okay.
It's come back up. Yeah, poor leadership 75%, poor communication 13%, poor consultation 0%, and poor methodology 13%.
Excellent.
So leadership by far the biggest.
Great. Well, I'm just checking my phone. I can see it on my phone. So for some reason my laptop's not working, but my phone is. So that's good. Anyway, we got there in some way or other. So you can see, obviously, you all plump for poor leadership, and I think that's pretty much in tune with what the research said then, and probably would say now if we repeated it. This was there's a book published after sustainability research called Staying Lean. This looked at the factors, including why it didn't work, and this the leadership stuff. Clear executive vision was the one that came out top of there. You mentioned, a few people mentioned communication, and you see other factors, urgency, creating a sense of urgency, poor consultation, lack of engagement with the employees, and so forth. So this became an important point where we realized you had to address all these softer factors, and nowhere does it say lean didn't work for us. It was really about the change management, the people management, which with hindsight was pretty obvious, really. But at the time, it was a bit of a wake-up call. So you had to start addressing these softer cultural communication issues before you zoom ahead with too much of the technical stuff. So that was an important milestone, I think, in early to 2000. And in that book, this iceberg was used as a sort of a graphic to help describe the sustainable system for lean management. It used the iceberg because we all know what an iceberg looks like. There's a bit above the water that we can see and a bit below the water that we can't see. And the idea was that in order to keep the whole thing afloat, your lean iceberg, you had to really address the stuff below the waterline, or this soft stuff: strategy, alignment, leadership, behavior, engagement, not just concentrate on the tools, techniques, and the sort of process management. So this led to the broad term lean management really is what you had to adopt. You had to develop and understand what is different to lean management of other management, if there is any difference. and the LCS, which had started around the technology tools, that he's given some framework, it also realized it had a role in this in the below the waterline area, in terms of especially in the behavior and engagement. So I think the lean iceberg model was an important point in which we realized there were several factors that led to sustainable lean management, and the important ones were these the below the waterline ones, the sort of softer behavioral strategic ones. So after that point, the focus switched more to how can we create this sort of culture and a leadership that exhibit the more lean management characteristics. So as part of that, and to link into the accreditation piece, we thought, well, let's turn the negatives into the positives, because these end up being the sustainability elements. And we've come up with this sustainability enablers jigsaw. So what we're saying is that to put something in place and start to embed it, you've got to think about, have you got these pieces of the jigsaw? And it's sort of, you need as many as possible in place if you're going to be successful in not just putting in your lean initiative, but making sure it sticks and then sustains over time. I've added a couple of extras to these, which link more to accreditation. One is, of course, contingent continuous improvement approach, which basically means, and this is something that came out of our early research at the Enterprise Research Centre, you've got to develop a version of lean that's suited to your world, is contingent on your circumstances, your processes, which was against a sort of one size fits all approach, which had become a sort of quite common in that time. So you've really got to develop something that works for you, and not just something that worked for somebody else and attempt to shoehorn it in. So that's an important part of sustainability. And obviously linked to that is a flexible and adaptable accreditation approach. Again, most accreditation models tend to specify what qualities you've got to follow it, and the accreditor checks you're doing it. Well, in the LCS world, that doesn't work because of this contingent approach. So that's another important ingredient of sustainability, is that flexibility. So what I'm going to say, well, let's look at some of these pieces of the jigsaw and see how they relate to accreditation. So I'll pick up the odd piece and then talk about it. Let's look at this contingent approach. As I said, really, and our mantra is you've got to adopt a contingent approach to lean. Contingent means it depends. So as I said, developing an approach that works for your particular environment, because this is really maximize your chance of getting it right, and the sort of helps avoid that one fit size all approach, which was common certainly in the early 2000s, and there were a lot of failure that resulted from that. And so our whole model says you've got to adapt whatever principles there are and ideas to suit your world, contextualized and bespoke. And our framework is designed so it flexes around whatever model of lean implementation you happen to put in place. So it's not prescriptive. There's not one best way of doing it, and that's the important thing. So I think we certainly champion this contingent approach, and of course you need a breadth of understanding of different approaches to lean and different methods and different tools to work out which ones are going to work best in your world. So contingent part, I think, is a starting point, which is why we don't, specify you've got to do this, you've got to do that. It's more about the outcome of creating the capability, and how you get there is really down to your own devices and choice. So contingency point is important, Peter, the jigsaw at the top level. Structured methodology and project management that came through as an important ingredient of success. I think at a top level, our framework is really provides the structure around which you can build a training program. It gives individuals a method which they can develop competency in a sort of in a cumulative way. Each of our levels, which really cover, from the shop floor, the basic level right to the strategic boardroom, each of those has a descriptor that specifies what an individual at that level should be able to know and should be able to do. And that provides an important structure around which you can build training and people can understand what competency they need to develop. And importantly, from an assessment point of view, in LCS world, the competency that has two dimensions of something and you can do something. So the application is obviously the critical part, and any organization that's accredited has to have an assessment linked to it, and above 1B, that assessment has to comprise of both demonstrate you know something and demonstrate you do something. So there's a project you will need to implement, show you've implemented the knowledge in the workplace to create a benefit, solve a problem, improve a process, or whatever. So that provides an automatic template to manage projects and gives a structure around which you can develop your training. So that sort of order is an important part of actually, I think, getting it right and having some framework on which you can then build and operate. Moving on from a link to that is the idea if you're going to mobilize change champions within the organization if you want to really be successful, what mechanism? The LCS has proven an important mechanism to do this. So what levels of competency do people need if you're going to be able to effectively implement and sustain? So what we'd like to see is that you for each level in the organization decide, well, who needs to be at what level from a lean competency point of view if we're going to be successful. And over time, this is, you'll need to, this doesn't happen overnight, but you need to say, and whatever your roles are, for example, in this example, people on the front line need to understand the key fundamental tools, techniques that they've used and implemented each day. As you go up the sort of chain at a higher level, it's more about the strategic stuff and the leadership stuff. And this will differ from organization to organization, but you need to have some mechanism to mobilize people and give them the knowledge to do that. Because if I believe in a lean organization, everyone is a continuous improver to some point or other, not necessarily as a values stream practitioner, but it could be just in a simple understanding where there's waste. So the idea is everyone can be is an improver, and the framework allows you to plan and understand who needs to have what capability and when. I think on that idea of everyone is a lean improver, one of my favorite lean images is this diagram here. It's called the Kaizen flag or the MI flag, and it's saying in a sustainable organization, everybody is doing improvement, and if everyone is doing a bit of strategy, there's a bit of operational stuff, and obviously that changes depending on your level. Executives are more doing strategic stuff, middle managers doing a bit of everything, and frontline mainly some day job. But improvement becomes a constant in everyone's role, and that's really the ideal state. In the book Staying Lean, there's various versions of this image. There's a one for a current organization, which is like, this is all these out of sort of shape, and there's like firefighting and all that sort of stuff in here as well. So, but this is where I think we need to think about if you think that you're going to have improvement in everyone's role. The other thing is that the model sort of enables scalability, really, because back to this idea that everyone is an improver, the evidence shows that you need a critical massive improvements to really build that momentum improvement. Another one of my favorite lean quotes is that, lean is about improving 99 things 1%, not one thing 99%. So if everyone is doing their bit and doing their 1%, you suddenly get that momentum and shift of which creates a sort of real cultural change. So that's another important part of the jigsaw, I think. Another piece is monitoring and evaluating outcomes and capability. Are you measuring what you're doing? Are you being successful? And I'll refer to this book here, the 3D Workplace, that was published last year by a partner in an accredited consultancy who did our level 3 program and part of his experience of his program led him to write this book, which is a description of their methodology they use to transform organizations. And the point he made in the book is that they see the framework provides an objective measure of the hands-on action or improvement capability of the organization, which they see as an important part of building the case and developing the capability. Things like embedding CI requires this new capability, embedded in those people who do the work. And then when it's embedded, it becomes part of the culture. So the LCS does focus on the individual as well as the organization. And because people are doing projects in which there are tangible results linked to those projects, he says it measures the true people capability because it's there on a project on an A3 or whatever mechanism you're going to use. So having that action orientation and with outcomes and tangible benefits to achieve, so certification gives that much more strength to that monitoring and looking at the outcomes that come out of the training. So that's an important one. Again, this has emerged from experience of this particular or organization that's embedded the model within the LCS within their sort of operational model. Okay, moving on, another important one, engaged employees. Probably this one, as I'd say, moved up the sort of hit parade compared to, we repeated that research now. And this is the reason when I'm talking to organizations, it becomes very important. People realize you've got to address the what's in it for me question if you want people to engage in continued improvement and make the changes. So the LCS does offer that framework for personal development. It gives the qualification with value, high value linked to a university, which is important. And there's other things linked to it, practitioner membership, continued professional development. So this is certainly an important part of how you've got to engage with people and give them something back, and not addressing the what's in it for me is a key failure point, I think. So it is important. And I think we have there's a meeting that's obviously it's finished during the pandemic, but it's coming back this year. Actually, it's one of our city customers has a reward and recognition event. They call it sort of a graduation ceremony every 6 months, in which they get everybody in a room with they have, this is a 1C level. People are selected to come and talk through their projects with their managers. They get this chap here is the chief operating officer of the whole bank, who comes down and gives some wise words of encouragement, which is really important. That shows the leadership's right behind it. And they do all sorts of internal communications. I always turn up to support it and hand out certificates with him. Massively powerful. And when you go to these events, you realize just a small investment in this sort of stuff does get these people all enthused. They come out and tell their friends it's on the internet and the web and social media. Very powerful stuff. So it's important to get that bit as part of the whole, publicizing and communicating the improvement success that takes place. So we've got the first one of these for 3 years coming back in September. I've just received an invite, which is good news. Reward and recognition. We asked managers a couple of years ago in some research, does accredited training provide tangible rewards that they appreciate? This is obviously awareness and overwhelming agreement that it did, and that for us was important to get that fact agreed by these sort of people. And I think when you look at recognition generally, you look at the research, it's saying that, when employees believe they're engaged, they're on this particular research 2.7 times more likely so when they're recognized, they're going to be engaged. Employee rates, definitely a top driver. Engagement can be a differentiator these days for organizations in their employee value proposition, attracting people. Certainly seen to have a positive impact on retention as well, as plus even links to things like productivity and loyalty, absenteeism. So there are all sorts of reasons why, beyond the sort of lean area process improvement, why recognition is an important ingredient of success. And I'm interested to see what happens over the next couple of years as the impact of this sort of dispersed workforce working at home and not coming to work, what impact that has on some of these factors, because I'm sure it's going to have some impact. Anyway, that's an important part of where accreditation can help, I think. A couple of pieces of the jigsaw: dedicated, well-resourced and implementation team, create and communicate a sense of urgency. I think accreditation in this context is really about the impact of being accredited. What we found is that the actual act of accreditation sends a powerful signal internally to staff that the organization is serious about what it's doing. It's strategically high on the agenda. It can also kickstart, and reinvigorate the CI momentum as well. And certainly creating and maintaining a standard that does become important, especially in large organizations, lots of geographical areas and divisions. You've got something which you can say as a carrot, look, this is this is the way we're going to use it. There's a bit of stick there because you don't want people to deviate and do their own thing, which I think is important from a consistency point of view. Simply used to get that consistency and standard across, whether that's geographical boundaries, organizational boundaries. So you have your own system, which is university being applied. And again, back to the workplace organization, that link with training with application does help develop the urgency, because you're constantly showing that there's some impact and you can change things. And you need that in real time. It needs to be quite happening all the time, not sort of 5-year projects or something. So it certainly has accreditation does play a role in this this creating the sense of urgency. Obviously, dedicated and well-resourced implementation team. You will normally have to have some center of excellence, some central team that spearheads the whole continuous improvement effort, develops a methodology, controls it. How it then works, how it's deployed is a different question, but it, by definition, you will end up having a implementation team that has to drive this forward, which you genuinely need, certainly at the start, if you want to get the thing going on the right sort of lines. Let's have another poll to see if it works. I'm not sure if I'll be able to look at it, but this one is about just what do you think managers thought the advantages of accredited training are. So let's see if I can find that poll, advantages of accredited training, which for some reason I can't launch. There's definitely something gone wrong with the Zoom poll facility that I normally use. Again, could be because I'm using my phone and I'm in Austria, who knows? Anyway, well, let's abandon that. I will talk about that. When we asked managers what were the advantages of accredited training, they came back with these were the sort of things: this credibility in independent endorsement. That still is important. It's amazing I've found how much organizations almost don't wouldn't say trust, but they want somebody outside to say what you're doing is correct and valid and so forth, and that becomes an important part of the internal PR battle. If you want people to buy into it and see it's it's not just something that you're doing, it's something that other people say is worth doing. This motivation one's obviously important. This sort of what's in it for me thing, it certainly helps that people, going back to the what's in it for me, definitely like the fact that they get a qualification. The reality is we've got to nurture our own CV, we've got to link it to our social media, etc. And you need a way to do that. And this structure of the guidelines of the training approach. The act of becoming accredited, as I said, does tighten up things. It makes you link up everything and make sure all the components are in place. Plus other things which are important, but those are still, I think, pretty important now as to why where accredited training can help. And then there's some more of this research about. We thought we'd just ask about productivity. This is obviously perception, but ultimately we'd like to see, lean must have impact on productivity. There's probably not enough research directly on that, but the general perception is it does have an impact on making people more productive, even through accredited training. So that's a positive link that I think we can follow up, I think, through some research. Okay, so that's my pieces of the jigsaw. I'll refer to that when I summarize now. Briefly, becoming accredited means that you issue certificates of lean competency to people who progress through your training program, and you become an accredited certifier of lean competency. And this is typically, these are the templates that people, in terms of certificates that people get. What's accredited is your lean training system, which is a sort of a grand word for it. Could be one course, it could be a center of excellence academy with several. So there's all the components that are required to enable effective lean training to be delivered. But it's the same for any training, but we want to check they're in place, and they link together, and they're aligned to the framework. So that there's a process that you submit evidence of your capability, and then we have a process reviewing that. Suitability, we're pretty broad on this. I mean, we've shown that it's any type of organization, really. You need a critical mass of people to be trained to worth being accredited. Otherwise, you can use a consultancy who are accredited. But there's no real limit, or there's no area which can't be. I think you've got to be developing a capability, a methodology, and either have a program in place or be delivering one. You need some delivery resources, but you can use external, and you need to be able to support it. But you can be at any stage brand new to experience and mature. So that doesn't make much. You can enter at a different point, really. The sort of question mark one is readiness, I think. Organizational readiness, of which we used to do some research in this. I think there is a case to say, is there some strategic intent and commitment with leadership, sponsorship, and support? And really, you ideally want your middle management buy-in as well. Those are the critical, going back to the point we made about sustainability. You've got to have those in place if you can become accredited, because if they're not, you're on fragile, thin ice. Stability ideally, but these days, what is stability? If you're not in the middle of an acquisition or a merger, but with COVID just gone by, that was probably a good place to do this, because you needed to have that thinking to inform the sort of the new normal. The other thing I'd say is there a positive perspective on what lean is? I see lean as a vehicle to create capacity, add value. Yes, waste reduction is part of the equation, but it's a means to an end. So there is a readiness thing, but importantly, that leadership and strategic stuff, I think, is what it's for you to decide this, obviously, as whether it's in place. And then the process itself, I won't go into much detail, but it's basically a 6-stage process. Most of it's about developing the portfolio, which is your evidence of your capability to deliver effective training in line to the framework. And that can take weeks, it can take months, totally down to the accrediting organization, really. And that other webinar I mentioned, it goes through this in a bit more detail. What's the portfolio consist of, and all that sort of stuff. So that's it in terms of the main reasons. Back to the jigsaw. So we look at those pieces. I've given sort of a tick rating for those in terms of where I think accreditation has a particularly high impact, and those are shown with things like structured methodology, contingent approach, engaged, and so forth. But it has an impact on others. Probably doesn't have an impact on the leadership stuff. That's going to be an internal thing, but it has enough an impact of the others to actually, I think, make a difference. And certainly, we're almost 20 years old now with the LCS. We can see how this has happened, and where it does have the greatest impact is when as many of these are sort of ticked as in play as possible. And again, our research, we asked viewers, does this help foster an improvement culture? Get the general agreement of managers, their perception, what it does, which is obviously what we tried to achieve, how it was when it was set up. Finish with the LCS lean effectiveness equation. This has come about saying, well, if we look at the effectiveness of your lean program, again, from what we've looked at over the past 20 odd years, there's an equation, I think, that works, which says that to be really effective, first of all, you need employee CI capability. So do you have people with the right skills and competence to use the right tools, techniques, and the right knowledge and right implementing experience to go and do it? Because ultimately, this is about frontline people implementing stuff and making it happen. They've got to be capable to do that. That's the first part of the equation. The second part of the equation is what lean approach and how are you deploying it? So what's your implementation model? is it strategically aligned? What's the design of your organization? You communicating effectively, you've guidance and support. This is down to you. And this is where this sort of contingent thing comes in. You've got to get this right. And you've seen many ones where they've trained people effectively, just got completely the wrong model, which means that it likely is going to work. Then the third part of the equation is the actual engagement of people involved. And that's the intrinsic motivation of people to want to do this, how well they're empowered, their commitment, their ownership, and the reward in place and support and management to do it. So this is what I think is the important, from our observation, is what makes the whole lean initiative effective. And they've all got to be working together. Now, the important thing about this is that our guesstimation is that engagement has 3 times the impact of A and B. So this is the bit you particularly got to get right. Because if there's failures or weaknesses in these, the positive engagement will overcome some of the shortcomings until you learn to get this right. And I think where the LCS has an impact directly is obviously in getting people with the right knowledge, helping to develop the skills and practice the skills, and then helping with that engagement, the reward and recognition. But all 3 have got to be really working together, and critically, this one has to be right as well. You've got to get that approach right and how you deploy it effectively in your organization. So that's I think the lean effectiveness equation, which has been developed from observing almost 20 years of how organizations have applied lean and used the accreditation approach. Okay, so I've finished my bit really, and we've got a couple of minutes. If anyone wants to ask any questions, please do so now. I'll take the screen off. So anyone got any questions? Unmute yourself and chip in. No?
Hi, Simon. Yeah, I've got a question.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
It's there's a couple of really good slides in there that'd be really useful for some of the work we're doing at HM Land Registry at the moment. Do you have that pack available? So
Yeah,
that
what we'll do, we'll in the next few days we'll circulate the links to and download that pack, and you can use it whatever you want, really. Yeah.
That's brilliant. And I know also a lot of my colleagues who would have liked to have joined today are actually delivering an LCS course.
Okay.
So this recording, will that be made available as well, so I can get them?
Yeah, we will put that on the we've got a web page with recordings, and we update it every time we have a new one. So we would put that there. It's probably because I'm abroad at the moment and I've got the bit of software for it. I'm not sure when I'm able to do that, but in the next week or so.
Not a problem. As soon as that comes out, I'll get that circulated around my team. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Any other queries or questions at this stage? Okay, well, I won't keep anybody. We're just about in time now, so thanks very much for turning up this morning, and we shall be in touch with the follow-up communications with the links to things, and any queries or questions. Meantime, drop us an email. So thanks very much.